Ambition often collapses under its own weight. Grand plans demand sweeping change, endless time, and constant intensity. Most people do not fail because they lack desire. They fail because their commitments are too large, too vague, and too emotionally expensive to sustain. A contained commitment changes the equation. It is a clearly defined, limited daily promise that removes ambiguity and excuses. 1 hour. Not 5. Not when I can. Not as much as possible. One deliberate hour, assigned in advance, protected by decision rather than mood. There is psychological relief in containment. When the mind hears every spare moment, it resists. When it hears one focused hour, it relaxes. The demand feels measurable. It feels survivable. That sense of containment reduces internal negotiation. You are no longer redesigning your life. You are keeping a small, firm promise. Future drift is what happens without this containment. Days fill themselves. Small distractions expand. Intentions dissolve into maintenance and reaction. Weeks pass in motion but not in direction. Without correction, life defaults toward convenience and familiarity. That drift is subtle. It rarely feels like failure. It feels like being busy. 1 hour interrupts that drift. The power of a contained hour is not in its length. It is in its clarity. A defined hour creates a boundary in time. Inside that boundary, you are not available for noise. You are not improvising your priorities. You are executing a decision already made. Consider a professional who wants to transition into a more skilled role. He talks about learning advanced analytics, but months go by with no measurable progress. Evenings are consumed by email, errands, and passive scrolling. 1 week he decides to isolate a single hour every morning from 6 to 7. During that hour, he studies one specific concept and applies it to a small dataset. The first week feels modest. The second week builds familiarity. After 3 months, he has completed several applied projects. After a year, he is operating at a different level of competence. Nothing dramatic occurred in a single day. The transformation came from containment. The hour did not compete with his life. It anchored it. The mind trusts what it sees repeated. When you honor a small promise daily, self-trust increases. The hour becomes proof that your word has weight. That proof matters more than inspiration. Inspiration fades. Evidence accumulates. Containment also forces prioritization. If you have only 1 hour, you must choose carefully. You cannot scatter your effort across 10 goals. You decide what deserves that protected space. That decision alone clarifies direction. It reveals what you value enough to protect. Many people believe they need more time before they begin. More freedom. More certainty. More energy. In reality, expansion follows structure. When 1 hour is used well, opportunities reorganize around the results. Skill grows. Confidence grows. Others begin to respond differently. Time is not found. It is justified. A contained hour reduces emotional drama. There is no need for heroic effort. There is only a simple standard: show up and work within the boundary. Some days will feel sharp. Others will feel dull. The commitment remains the same. The steadiness of the container holds you when mood fluctuates. This approach also prevents burnout. Endless effort exhausts. A defined edge protects recovery. When the hour ends, you stop. That stopping point preserves sustainability. You are building something durable, not staging a temporary surge. Try a simple drill. Choose one meaningful skill or project that, if improved steadily for a year, would change your trajectory. Assign it a fixed hour in your day, ideally at a time with the least friction. Before the first session, decide exactly what working means during that hour. Remove obvious distractions from the environment. When the hour begins, start immediately, even if the pace feels slow. When the hour ends, stop cleanly and note what will begin tomorrow. Repeat this process for 14 consecutive days without renegotiating the duration. At first, the results may seem small. That is expected. The true shift is structural. You are replacing vague ambition with measured action. You are stepping out of drift and into direction. 1 hour does not look impressive from the outside. It rarely earns applause. Yet it carries a quiet force. Containment builds reliability. Reliability builds momentum. Momentum, sustained long enough, becomes a different future. Intensity is attractive. It feels powerful. A surge of motivation can create a burst of effort that looks impressive for a few days. Yet intensity is unstable. It depends on emotion, and emotion shifts with sleep, stress, weather, and circumstance. Identity is steadier. Discipline that lasts does not grow from how strongly you feel. It grows from who you believe you are. When behavior aligns with identity, effort becomes natural. When behavior conflicts with identity, it feels forced. Identity evidence is repeated action that proves who you are becoming. It is not a declaration. It is not a goal written in a notebook. It is the quiet record of what you actually do. Each contained hour you complete becomes a small piece of evidence. Over time, those pieces accumulate into a new self-concept. Most people attempt change by aiming for intensity. They wait to feel ready. They look for the right mood. They tell themselves they will begin when their energy matches their ambition. This keeps identity unchanged. You remain someone who intends, not someone who executes. A daily hour changes the narrative. The act itself becomes proof. After 10 consecutive days, you are no longer trying to become disciplined. You have evidence that you are disciplined for at least 1 hour. After 60 days, the evidence is difficult to ignore. The mind adapts to patterns. It updates its internal story based on repetition. There is a subtle but critical shift that happens here. The focus moves from outcome to standard. Instead of asking, "Did I make massive progress today?" you begin asking, "Did I keep my hour?" The outcome will come later. The identity forms now. Imagine a woman who decides to write professionally. For years she has described herself as someone who wants to write. She reads about writing. She talks about ideas. Occasionally, during a burst of inspiration, she writes for 3 hours straight. Then weeks pass without a single paragraph. She chooses a different approach. Every evening at 8, she writes for 1 contained hour. Some days the words feel sharp. Other days they feel mechanical. She writes anyway. After a month, she has produced more pages than in the previous year. After 6 months, she no longer introduces herself as someone who wants to write. She says she is a writer. Not because of praise. Not because of publication. Because the evidence is undeniable. The identity has shifted. This is the quiet power of repetition. When identity shifts, resistance weakens. A person who sees himself as unreliable must fight himself each day. A person who sees herself as consistent experiences less friction. The action fits the self-image. The hour stops feeling like an external demand and starts feeling like alignment. There is also protection in this shift. When results temporarily slow, identity holds steady. If you only rely on visible progress, you may quit during plateaus. If you rely on identity evidence, you continue because the behavior reflects who you are, not just what you are chasing. The contained hour serves as a daily vote. Each session is a vote for the disciplined version of you. No single vote decides the outcome. the accumulation does. A practical exercise can strengthen this process. Before beginning your hour, state quietly and plainly who you are training to become. Keep the statement simple and behavior-based, such as, "I am a person who practices my craft daily." After completing the hour, record it in a visible place. Do this without commentary. No judgment about quality. No emotional analysis. Only record whether the standard was met. Continue this for 30 days. At the end of that period, review the record and observe the pattern. Let the pattern speak. Over time, the language you use internally begins to change. You stop negotiating with yourself as if discipline were optional. You stop asking whether you feel like showing up. The decision has already been made by the identity you are reinforcing. Intensity will still visit occasionally. Some days will feel strong and productive. Welcome those days, but do not depend on them. The foundation is quieter than that. You are not building a streak to impress anyone. You are constructing a self-image that can carry weight. One focused hour becomes more than time invested. It becomes proof. When proof accumulates, belief stabilizes. When belief stabilizes, behavior follows with less resistance. Identity forms slowly, then all at once. And it begins with something small enough to repeat tomorrow. A promise without structure depends on willpower. Structure reduces the need for willpower. Many people protect an hour in theory but waste it in practice. They sit down unsure of what to do. They switch tasks midway. They chase small urgencies that feel productive but lead nowhere meaningful. Time passes, yet progress feels thin. The issue is not effort. It is design. Our architecture is the deliberate structure assigned to each focused session. It answers 3 questions before the hour begins. What exactly will be worked on? What does progress look like today? Where will attention be directed first? Clarity at the start prevents drift inside the boundary. When the mind faces open space, it hesitates. Unstructured time invites distraction because it demands constant choice. Each choice consumes energy. A well-architected hour removes most of those decisions in advance. You already know the task. You already know the next step. You begin immediately. Effective architecture is specific and narrow. Work on my business is too broad. Outline the landing page headline and subhead is concrete. Study mathematics is vague. Complete exercises 1 through 10 on quadratic equations is measurable. Specificity creates momentum because completion becomes visible. There is also value in sequencing. The first minutes should be assigned to the most cognitively demanding portion of the work. Early attention is sharper. If you spend it checking minor details, depth never arrives. Design the hour so that the hardest meaningful action comes first, before fatigue or distraction can interfere. Consider a software developer who wants to build a portfolio strong enough to shift careers. Previously, he would open his laptop and browse tutorials without direction. Some evenings he coded. Other evenings he reorganized folders or read forums. He felt busy, yet his portfolio barely advanced. He redesigned his hour. Each night before ending his session, he wrote down the exact function he would build the next day. When the hour began, he opened directly to that file. The first 40 minutes were reserved strictly for writing and debugging that function. The final 20 minutes were used to test and document what he had completed. Within 3 months, he had finished several polished projects. The difference was not talent. It was architecture. Structure also protects against perfectionism. When you define what "done for today" means, you avoid endless tweaking. The hour has a scope. Once the defined objective is reached, you stop. This builds rhythm. Daily completion compounds faster than occasional overextension. Preparation supports architecture. Before the hour starts, remove obvious friction. Open the necessary tools. Clear the workspace. Silence notifications. Small actions taken beforehand preserve focus during execution. The goal is to make beginning almost automatic. There is discipline in deciding what will not happen during the hour. Secondary tasks, messages, and research tangents may feel important. If they are not part of the predefined objective, they wait. This boundary keeps depth intact. A useful drill can refine this process. At the end of each session, take 3 quiet minutes to design tomorrow's hour. Write 1 sentence that defines the primary task and 1 sentence that defines what completion will look like. Place this note where you will see it at the start of the next session. When the hour begins, follow the design without modification. Continue this practice for 2 weeks and observe how much faster you enter meaningful work. Over time, you will notice a shift. Starting becomes easier because the path is already laid. Focus deepens because fewer decisions compete for attention. Progress becomes measurable because each session has a visible output. Well-designed hours create steady advancement. Poorly designed hours create activity without direction. The difference is rarely visible in a single day. It becomes obvious over months. 1 hour, architected with intention, turns effort into accumulation. Accumulation turns skill into leverage. The container remains the same. The internal design determines its power. Even with a clear identity and a well-designed hour, there is a predictable obstacle waiting at the edge of action. It appears in the minutes before you begin. It sounds reasonable. It suggests delay. This is friction. Activation energy is the effort required to begin a task. It has little to do with the difficulty of the work itself. Often, the hardest part is not the hour. It is the first 5 minutes. The mind prefers familiar, low-effort rewards. Checking messages feels easier than opening a complex document. Making coffee feels easier than outlining a proposal. Friction magnifies small discomforts and turns them into convincing excuses. I'll start after dinner. I need to feel clearer. Tomorrow will be better. Lowering activation energy is more effective than trying to overpower resistance. One method is environmental priming. If the guitar is already on its stand in the center of the room, practice begins faster. If the notebook is open on the desk with yesterday's final sentence visible, writing resumes with less hesitation. Preparation shrinks the distance between intention and action. Another method is reducing the perceived scope of the start. You are not beginning an hour. You are beginning 5 minutes. The agreement is simple. Sit down and engage for 5 focused minutes. Most of the time, momentum builds naturally once movement begins. The barrier is crossed quietly. Resistance often disguises itself as rational evaluation. You may suddenly question the value of the task. You may doubt whether this skill truly matters. Notice the timing of those thoughts. They rarely appear during distraction. They appear precisely when meaningful work is about to start. Imagine a manager preparing to develop a new strategic proposal. The project could elevate her role within the company, but it carries uncertainty. Each evening she plans to work on it during her contained hour. As the time approaches, she feels a subtle heaviness. She reorganizes her desk. She responds to minor emails. She tells herself she needs clearer data before beginning. One evening she changes the approach. Before dinner, she places the project outline at the center of her desk and writes a single instruction at the top: draft the opening problem statement. When the hour arrives, she sits down and begins writing imperfect sentences. 10 minutes later, the resistance has faded. 40 minutes later, the core argument is visible. The discomfort was concentrated at the starting line, not in the work itself. This pattern repeats across disciplines. The body resists cold water before entering it. Once submerged, the shock passes. Starting is often sharper than continuing. Reducing friction also means accepting imperfection at the beginning. If you require ideal focus, ideal energy, and ideal clarity, you will rarely move. Begin in ordinary conditions. Begin slightly tired. Begin slightly uncertain. Progress refines quality. Delay preserves doubt. There is strength in immediacy. When the scheduled time arrives, stand up and move directly to the task without commentary. Avoid internal debate. Debate increases activation energy. Action decreases it. Try a practical drill for the next 7 days. Before ending each session, prepare the first physical step of tomorrow's work. Lay out the materials. Open the document. Place any necessary tools within reach. When the next hour begins, commit to working for only 5 uninterrupted minutes. Do not evaluate performance during that window. After 5 minutes, decide whether to continue. Most days, continuation will feel easier than stopping. Record how often the resistance was stronger before starting than during the work. Friction does not disappear as you grow. It changes form. Larger goals may produce subtler hesitation. The solution remains similar. Reduce the gap between decision and action. Prepare in advance. Start smaller than your fear suggests is necessary. Once movement begins, energy often follows. The starting line loses its power when crossed consistently. Over time, the act of beginning becomes less dramatic. It becomes routine. A contained hour thrives when starting is automatic. Lower the barrier. Step forward without ceremony. The work rarely resists as much as the anticipation of it. There is a hidden trap in personal growth. It is the desire to feel powerful while you are improving. People want momentum to feel dramatic. They want discipline to feel intense. They want visible leaps that confirm something extraordinary is happening. Real progress is quieter than that. Emotional neutrality is the ability to work without needing excitement, urgency, or emotional charge. It is the steady execution of a standard regardless of how the day feels. This is where consistency becomes stronger than motivation. Intensity creates stories. Consistency creates results. When you rely on emotion, your output fluctuates. A good mood produces a long session. A bad mood produces delay. Over time, these swings erode trust. You never quite know which version of yourself will show up. Neutrality simplifies the process. The hour begins at the same time. The task is executed as designed. Some days feel light. Some days feel heavy. The behavior does not change. This is not suppression. It is stability. Consider an athlete training for endurance. On certain mornings, energy is high and the body responds easily. On others, sleep was shallow and muscles feel stiff. If training only occurred on energetic days, performance would stagnate. Instead, the athlete runs according to plan. Pace adjusts slightly when needed, but the session is completed. Over months, endurance improves not because of heroic days, but because of ordinary ones. The same principle applies to intellectual and professional growth. A consultant decided to dedicate 1 hour each day to refining her analytical writing. In the beginning, she waited for clear thinking. She believed strong writing required strong inspiration. The result was uneven output. After shifting to a neutral standard, she wrote daily regardless of mood. Some sessions produced paragraphs she later revised heavily. Others produced clean drafts. After a year, her clarity improved dramatically. Clients began to notice. The breakthrough was not emotional. It was cumulative. Neutrality also protects against overextension. When you feel energized, it is tempting to double the hour, to push late into the night, to chase the high of productivity. Occasionally that may be useful. Repeated often, it destabilizes rhythm. The next day, fatigue invites skipping. The cycle of surge and collapse returns. A defined hour, kept steady, avoids this pattern. You finish when the boundary arrives. You leave some energy unused. That restraint preserves tomorrow. There will be days when the hour feels slow and unimpressive. The mind may whisper that nothing meaningful is happening. This is where emotional neutrality matters most. You are not working for daily excitement. You are working for long-term accumulation. Boredom is not a signal to stop. It is often a sign that repetition is doing its quiet work. Skill deepens through repeated exposure to fundamentals. Mastery is rarely entertaining in the moment. A useful practice can reinforce this mindset. At the end of each session, rate the quality of your focus on a scale from 1 to 5. Do not judge the output. Only assess presence and adherence to the plan. Then return the next day, aiming simply to meet the standard again. Over several weeks, observe the pattern. You will likely notice that even average sessions, when repeated, produce visible advancement. Stability builds trust. When you know that you will work whether the day feels strong or weak, internal negotiation decreases. The hour becomes part of the day's structure, not a question mark hanging over it. Dramatic change is appealing, but it is unreliable. Ordinary repetition, held long enough, becomes extraordinary in outcome. The future rarely shifts because of one inspired day. It shifts because of hundreds of steady ones. Calm effort compounds. Neutral execution strengthens. The hour continues, unremarkable in isolation, powerful in accumulation. Once the hour is defined, structured, and emotionally steady, the real world begins to test it. Distraction is not accidental. It is designed. Notifications, messages, open tabs, background noise, and small requests all compete for your attention. Each one feels minor. Together, they fracture focus. An attention boundary is a protective limit placed around focus and time. It is not a vague intention to avoid distractions. It is a concrete decision about what is allowed inside the hour and what is not. Without a boundary, your contained commitment becomes porous. You are technically present, but mentally divided. Depth disappears in fragments. Attention behaves like light. When concentrated, it can cut through complexity. When scattered, it warms nothing. Many people underestimate how often they switch tasks. A quick glance at a message seems harmless. A short response feels efficient. Yet each interruption forces the mind to reload context. Momentum breaks. The hour becomes a series of partial starts rather than sustained progress. Protecting the hour requires visible signals. Silence the phone completely or place it in another room. Close unnecessary tabs. Inform those around you that you are unavailable for a defined period. These actions may feel rigid at first. In reality, they create freedom inside the boundary. Consider a father working from home who commits to a daily hour of skill development in the early evening. At first, he keeps his phone on the desk. Messages light up the screen. Even when he does not respond, his attention shifts. He finishes the hour feeling scattered. He adjusts the environment. Before the hour begins, he places the phone in a drawer in another room. He closes email entirely. He tells his family that from 7 to 8 he is not to be interrupted unless something is urgent. The first few days feel unfamiliar. Then something changes. His thinking becomes deeper. He finishes tasks that previously stretched across multiple sessions. The hour feels longer without actually being longer. The difference is the boundary. Boundaries are not about isolation from life. They are about sequencing. During the hour, you honor the commitment. Outside the hour, You are fully available again. Clear separation prevents resentment. You are not half working and half present. You are fully engaged in one role at a time. There will be external pressures. A colleague may request immediate input. A friend may expect instant replies. Not every interruption can be avoided. The key is intentionality. Decide in advance what qualifies as urgent enough to cross the boundary. Everything else waits. Digital environments require particular discipline. Algorithms are engineered to capture attention. If your tools are connected to endless feeds, distraction is only a click away. Design friction here as well. Log out of non-essential platforms before the hour. Use full screen modes. Remove visual triggers that invite wandering. Attention is trainable. Each time you resist checking something unnecessary, you strengthen focus. Each time you give in, you reinforce fragmentation. Over months, this pattern shapes cognitive endurance and output quality. A practical drill can solidify this protection. For the next 10 sessions, create a short pre-hour ritual that signals the beginning of your boundary. It may be as simple as clearing the desk, closing the door, and taking one slow breath before starting. During the hour, if you feel the urge to check something unrelated, write it down on a small notepad without acting on it. Return immediately to the task. After the hour ends, review the list and address what truly requires attention. Notice how few items are genuinely urgent. Respecting your attention boundary communicates something important to yourself. It signals that your focused work matters, that it deserves insulation from noise, that your time has structure. In a distracted world, protection is power. The hour remains the same length. The depth inside it expands when defended. Over time, the ability to hold attention becomes a quiet advantage that others underestimate. Guard the boundary. Depth follows. The hour is protected. The distractions are contained. The structure is clear. Now the question becomes depth. Cognitive endurance is the ability to sustain deep concentration over time. It is not intensity. It is not speed. It is the capacity to remain with one demanding task without drifting mentally or seeking relief. Most people have trained themselves for interruption. Short bursts of attention. Constant switching. Rapid consumption. As a result, when they attempt sustained focus, discomfort appears quickly. The mind searches for novelty. The body becomes restless. The work feels heavier than it truly is. Endurance grows through exposure. When you remain with a task beyond the point of mild boredom, something shifts. The surface layer of thought begins to thin. Initial obvious ideas are exhausted. Deeper connections start to emerge. This is where original insight and real skill development occur. The first 15 minutes of focus often clear mental residue from the day. The next 20 build rhythm. After that, depth becomes possible. If you interrupt yourself repeatedly, you reset the process each time. You live permanently in the shallow layer. Training cognitive endurance means staying slightly longer than comfort suggests. A financial analyst committed to using his hour to master complex modeling techniques. At first, he noticed that after 20 minutes, his mind wandered. He felt the urge to check messages or stand up unnecessarily. Instead of stopping, he decided to remain seated and work through one more difficult problem before allowing a break. The first week felt mentally tiring. By the third week, the urge to escape appeared later in the session. By the second month, he could sustain intense modeling work for nearly the full hour without significant strain. Colleagues began to notice the precision of his analysis. The improvement did not come from longer hours. It came from deeper ones. Depth requires patience with confusion. When learning something advanced, there is often a period where understanding feels incomplete. Many people retreat at this stage because clarity has not yet formed. Endurance means tolerating that temporary uncertainty without abandoning the task. There is also a physical component. Posture influences attention. A stable seated position, steady breathing, and minimal fidgeting signal commitment to the task. The body can either reinforce distraction or reinforce focus. Silence supports endurance. Even low-level background noise can fragment thought. When possible, choose environments that reduce sensory input. If silence is unavailable, use consistent, non-distracting sound rather than variable audio that pulls awareness outward. Progress in endurance is gradual. At first, you may only manage 20 truly focused minutes within the hour. That is acceptable. Measure improvement quietly. Aim to extend deep focus by a few minutes each week. Over months, the difference becomes substantial. Try a structured exercise for the next 14 days. Divide your hour into 2 segments. In the first segment, commit to uninterrupted focus for a fixed period slightly longer than your current comfort threshold, perhaps 25 or 30 minutes. During that time, no checking, no shifting tasks, no physical wandering. When the segment ends, take a brief, deliberate pause of 2 or 3 minutes. Then resume for the remaining time with the same standard. Track how often you complete the first segment without breaking concentration. Notice how the mind adapts. Endurance builds confidence. When you know you can stay with difficulty, complex challenges lose their intimidation. Tasks that once seemed overwhelming become manageable because you trust your capacity to remain engaged. Shallow work produces surface results. Deep work produces rare capability. The hour becomes more valuable as your ability to stay within it strengthens. Focus is a muscle shaped by repetition. Patience expands it. Steady exposure reinforces it. Over time, depth becomes normal rather than exhausting. The container has been set. The boundary has been defended. Now the mind learns to stay. Starting builds momentum. Depth builds capability. Finishing builds credibility. Many disciplined people still struggle with completion. They begin strong. They generate ideas. They produce drafts. Then something subtle happens near the end of a task. Energy fades. Attention shifts toward something new. The almost finished work lingers in a gray zone. Loop closure is the disciplined act of finishing what was started. It is more than checking a box. It is the intentional decision to carry effort across the final stretch until the task reaches a defined end. Open loops consume mental space. An unfinished proposal sits quietly in the background of your thoughts. A half-completed course outline creates subtle tension. Even if you are not actively working on them, they occupy cognitive bandwidth. Multiply this by 10 or 20 tasks, and your mind becomes crowded. Closing loops clears that space. There is also a psychological reward in completion that beginning cannot provide. Starting signals intention. Finishing signals reliability. Over time, people begin to associate you not with ideas, but with results. The last 20% of a task often requires a different kind of energy than the first 80. The initial phase is creative and expansive. The final phase demands refinement, correction, and sometimes repetition. It feels less exciting. That is precisely why it separates amateurs from professionals. Consider a graphic designer building a portfolio during his daily hour. He sketches concepts quickly. He experiments with layouts. After several sessions, he has multiple promising drafts. Yet none are polished enough to present publicly. Each time refinement becomes tedious, he shifts to a new idea. Eventually, he changes his rule. For every project he starts, he must bring one to full completion before beginning another. That means adjusting alignment, refining typography, correcting color inconsistencies, exporting properly formatted files, and presenting the work cleanly. The first few times feel slow. He resists the meticulous detail. Within months, however, his portfolio looks dramatically different. Not because of more ideas, but because of finished ones. Completion compounds reputation and skill. The daily hour becomes especially powerful when at least part of it is reserved for bringing existing work to closure. Instead of constantly expanding the list of projects, you reduce it. Instead of chasing novelty, you strengthen execution. Finishing also trains emotional steadiness. The final phase of work may expose imperfections. You see what could have been better. You confront limits in your current ability. Closing the loop anyway builds resilience. You learn to ship work that meets your standard, even if it is not flawless. There is discipline in defining what finished means. Without that definition, tasks stretch indefinitely. Completion does not require perfection. It requires a clear threshold. When that threshold is met, you release the work and move forward. Try a focused practice for the next 3 weeks. At the start of each week, identify one meaningful task that can realistically be completed within several daily hours. Break it into clear segments using your hour architecture. During each session, ask whether your effort is moving the task toward closure or merely expanding it. Before the week ends, bring the task to its defined finish. Resist the urge to begin something new until it is done. Observe how your confidence changes when you see tangible results accumulating. There is calm strength in being someone who finishes. Ideas are common. Partially executed plans are everywhere. Completed work is rare enough to create distinction. The contained hour becomes more valuable when it produces outcomes that can be seen, used, or shared. Each closed loop reinforces your self-trust. Each finished project reduces mental clutter. Each completion strengthens your professional identity. Momentum begins with starting. Depth strengthens through focus. Credibility solidifies with completion. Close the loop. Clear the space. Let finished work speak quietly on your behalf. Consistency is easy when conditions are stable. The real test appears when life becomes unpredictable. Travel disrupts routines. Deadlines compress time. Family responsibilities expand. Energy fluctuates. In these moments, the daily hour feels negotiable. It seems practical to skip just for today. This is where adaptive consistency becomes essential. It is the ability to maintain the habit despite changing conditions. It does not mean rigidly forcing the exact same performance every day. It means protecting the commitment while intelligently adjusting its expression. Rigidity breaks under pressure. Adaptation bends and holds. Many people abandon their discipline because they confuse structure with inflexibility. When their ideal environment disappears, they assume the hour cannot happen. In reality, the container can remain even if the content shifts slightly. Imagine an executive who travels frequently for work. At home, his hour takes place early in the morning at a quiet desk. On the road, flights are delayed and schedules move. At first, he skips the hour entirely during travel days, telling himself he will resume next week. Momentum fades. He changes his approach. The commitment remains 1 hour, but the timing becomes flexible within the day. If mornings collapse, he uses a quiet corner of an airport lounge. If the environment is noisy, he shifts from complex creation to focused review or structured learning that fits the context. The standard remains: 1 intentional hour connected to his long-term objective. Travel no longer breaks the chain. Pressure often creates a false hierarchy where urgent tasks crowd out important ones. When deadlines increase, it feels logical to sacrifice personal development. Yet this is precisely when the hour provides stability. It becomes an anchor in unstable weeks. Fatigue presents another challenge. After a demanding day, The mind argues for rest over effort. Adaptive consistency does not ignore exhaustion. It recognizes degrees. On low-energy days, the pace may slow. The output may be modest. The commitment remains intact. Showing up at 70% maintains identity. Skipping entirely weakens it. There is strength in protecting the minimum standard. Even in difficult periods, the contained commitment does not expand or disappear. It holds its shape. What changes is the intensity inside it. A practical exercise can prepare you for unpredictable weeks. Identify 3 alternative versions of your hour in advance. The first is your ideal session in optimal conditions. The second is a simplified session suitable for busy days. The third is a reduced complexity session for travel or high fatigue, focused on review, refinement, or structured study rather than creative output. Decide in advance that under no circumstances will the hour become 0. It may shift form, but it will exist. When stress rises, your pre-decided alternatives prevent emotional decision-making. You are not asking whether to work. You are choosing which version fits today. Uncertainty also tests long-term projects. Progress may stall. Results may take longer than expected. Doubt increases under pressure. Adaptive consistency means continuing the hour even when visible progress slows. The container protects the trajectory when outcomes are temporarily invisible. Consider a graduate student balancing research with a demanding part-time job. During exam season, her schedule compresses. Instead of abandoning her thesis work, she shifts her daily hour to reviewing sources and refining notes rather than drafting new sections. When the intense period passes, she transitions back to writing. Because the habit never disappeared, restarting required no emotional rebuilding. Life will not clear a perfect path for your growth. Responsibilities will expand. Unexpected events will interrupt. The discipline lies not in controlling conditions, but in responding intelligently without surrendering the commitment. Stability under pressure builds quiet confidence. You begin to trust that external turbulence does not dictate your internal standards. The hour remains. Its shape may flex, but its presence is steady. Over time, this resilience becomes part of your character. You are no longer someone who works only when conditions are ideal. You are someone who adjusts and continues. Pressure reveals whether discipline is situational or structural. When the commitment survives difficulty, it becomes structural. And structural habits create lasting change. Small improvements feel insignificant in isolation. A single hour of practice rarely produces visible transformation. The change is subtle, almost invisible. This is why many people underestimate the force of accumulation. Skill compounding is gradual improvement that multiplies over time. It operates quietly. Each session adds a thin layer of refinement. Layers stack. Over months and years, the difference between consistent practice and scattered effort becomes dramatic. Compounding rewards patience. When you repeat focused effort daily, neural pathways strengthen. Patterns become familiar. Mistakes become easier to detect. Execution becomes smoother. The same task that once required strain begins to feel controlled. This is not sudden talent. It is accumulated exposure. The contained hour is ideal for compounding because it is sustainable. Large bursts of effort may produce temporary leaps, but they are rarely repeated long enough to multiply. 1 hour, practiced across hundreds of days, creates depth that others cannot replicate casually. There is also strategic value in choosing the right area for compounding. Not all skills produce equal leverage. Some abilities, once developed, increase the value of many other actions. Clear writing sharpens thinking. Analytical reasoning improves decision-making. Public speaking expands influence. Technical fluency opens opportunities across industries. Selecting a skill with broad application turns your daily hour into a long-term multiplier. Imagine a mid-level manager who decides to dedicate his hour to mastering structured communication. Each day he practices organizing ideas, refining concise summaries, and delivering short presentations aloud. At first, improvement is modest. He stumbles over phrasing. He revises repeatedly. After 6 months, meetings feel different. His updates are clearer. His proposals are sharper. Senior leaders begin to rely on him to articulate complex issues. After 2 years, he is seen as someone who brings clarity under pressure. The skill he compounded daily now amplifies every interaction in his career. Compounding also protects against stagnation. When you measure progress over weeks, it may appear slow. When you measure it over years, the curve becomes visible. Those who quit early never experience the acceleration phase where accumulated skill begins to generate disproportionate returns. The hour builds momentum beneath the surface. At some point, opportunities align with your preparation. What appears to others as sudden success is usually the visible tip of a long compounding process. There is discipline in staying with a chosen skill long enough to let it multiply. Switching focus too frequently resets the curve. Depth requires continuity. This does not mean you can never adjust direction. It means you avoid abandoning a skill before it matures. A useful exercise can sharpen this effect. Identify one core capability that, if improved steadily for 3 years, would significantly elevate your professional or personal trajectory. Write down why it matters and how it connects to your broader goals. During your daily hour, track small measurable improvements related to that skill, such as clarity, speed, accuracy, or confidence. Review these markers every 90 days. Notice patterns rather than daily fluctuations. Compounding also changes how you experience difficulty. Challenges that once felt overwhelming become manageable because your baseline competence has risen. You approach complex tasks with calm rather than hesitation. The world often celebrates dramatic breakthroughs. It rarely sees the quiet hours that built them. Your responsibility is not to display the process. It is to remain loyal to it. Over time, your skill base differentiates you. Conversations shift. Expectations change. Opportunities expand. None of this requires extraordinary daily effort. It requires sustained, deliberate practice. 1 hour a day, invested wisely, becomes a long-term asset. The gains accumulate even when you cannot see them clearly. Stay with the process. Allow time to multiply your effort. What feels small today can become decisive in the future. There is a visible shift that occurs after months and years of honoring a daily hour. It is not loud. It does not announce itself. It shows up in posture, in tone, in the way you enter a room. Discipline practiced privately reshapes presence publicly. The calm presence of a disciplined person is not forced confidence. It is the steadiness that comes from repeated self-trust. When you know, without exaggeration, that you keep promises to yourself, your movements slow slightly. Your speech becomes more measured. You no longer rush to prove capacity because you have evidence of it. Self-doubt often expresses itself physically. Restless gestures. Over-explaining. Filling silence too quickly. These signals are subtle, yet others perceive them. Consistent private discipline reduces this need for external validation. When you complete your contained hour day after day, you accumulate internal confirmation. You know you are building something. You know your skills are advancing through skill compounding. You know you can adapt under pressure because you have practiced adaptive consistency. This knowledge settles the nervous system. Consider a team leader who has spent 2 years refining her strategic thinking during her daily hour. She studies case scenarios, analyzes decisions, and practices structured reasoning. In meetings, complex discussions arise. In the past, she would speak quickly, trying to keep up, worried about missing something important. Now her approach is different. She listens fully. She pauses before responding. When she speaks, her points are concise and organized. She does not dominate the conversation, yet when she contributes, the room grows attentive. Her calm is not theatrical. It is rooted in preparation. Presence is shaped by private standards. A personal standard is a self-imposed level of performance maintained daily. It is independent of applause. When your standard is clear, you are less reactive to external fluctuations. Praise does not inflate you. Criticism does not collapse you. Both are processed with perspective. This steadiness influences how others respond. People trust those who appear internally anchored. They sense when someone is not scrambling for approval. The disciplined hour, repeated over time, builds that anchor. Calm presence also changes how you handle uncertainty. When unexpected challenges arise, you are less likely to panic. You have trained your mind to focus deeply, to finish what you start, to protect your attention. These habits transfer into real-time situations. There is a difference between loud confidence and quiet assurance. Loud confidence seeks to be seen. Quiet assurance simply acts. It does not require constant reinforcement because it rests on accumulated identity evidence. A practical exercise can strengthen this embodiment. For the next month, after completing your daily hour, take 2 minutes to stand still and breathe slowly. Recall one concrete action you executed during the session. Let that fact register without exaggeration. Then carry that awareness into your next interaction, whether it is a conversation, a meeting, or a decision. Notice how even a small acknowledgement of disciplined action influences your tone and pace. Over time, this integration becomes natural. The line between private work and public behavior fades. Your preparation informs your presence automatically. Calm presence does not mean passivity. It means controlled energy. When you choose to act, your actions carry weight because they are not impulsive. They are considered. People may not know about your daily hour. They may never see the effort behind it. They will, however, sense the results. They will notice clarity in your words, stability in your decisions, patience in your reactions. One focused hour a day seems small, yet repeated long enough, it reshapes not only what you can do, but how you appear while doing it. The future begins to reflect that steadiness, and others begin to respond accordingly. Reputation rarely changes because of a single impressive moment. It changes because of patterns observed over time. Silent reputation is trust built through consistent behavior rather than claims. It grows slowly. It does not rely on self-promotion. It forms in the minds of others as they notice that your actions align with your words. The daily hour, practiced privately, eventually becomes visible indirectly. Not because you announce it, but because the results begin to surface in your work, your reliability, and your decisions. People are attentive to consistency. They notice who delivers repeatedly. They notice who remains steady under pressure. They notice who finishes what they start. These observations accumulate quietly. A professional does not need to remind others of their discipline. The evidence appears in preparation, in clarity, in punctuality, in follow-through. Imagine a consultant who has spent years dedicating 1 hour each day to refining her analytical thinking and written communication. She does not speak about her routine. She simply submits reports that are structured, concise, and insightful. In meetings, her comments are measured and relevant. When deadlines approach, she remains composed and organized. Over time, colleagues begin to rely on her. When a complex project emerges, her name surfaces naturally. not because she asked for visibility, but because her pattern has created trust. Her silent reputation has formed. Reputation built on noise is fragile. It depends on constant visibility. Reputation built on discipline is durable. It rests on repeated proof. There is also a protective quality to this kind of trust. When you make a mistake, and you eventually will, your established consistency provides context. Others are more likely to interpret the error as an exception rather than a defining flaw. A strong pattern absorbs occasional imperfection. This does not mean striving for perfection. It means honoring your personal standard consistently enough that others experience you as dependable. Silent reputation influences opportunity. Invitations appear. Responsibilities expand. Recommendations happen without your awareness. The world responds to reliability because reliability reduces risk. The key is patience. In the early stages, your daily hour may feel invisible. No one sees the effort. No one comments on the incremental growth. Continue anyway. Reputation is not built in weeks. It is built in seasons and years. A simple exercise can align your daily practice with long-term trust. At the end of each week, reflect on one way your disciplined hour improved your visible work. Perhaps your communication was clearer. Perhaps your analysis was sharper. Perhaps your demeanor was calmer. Write this observation down. Then ask yourself whether your external behavior reflects the same standard you hold privately. Adjust where necessary. Alignment between private discipline and public behavior strengthens credibility. Consistency across contexts is powerful. If you are focused only when supervised, trust remains limited. If you demonstrate the same steadiness regardless of visibility, confidence in you deepens. Silent reputation does not require self-advertisement. It requires repetition. Each kept promise to yourself strengthens the likelihood that you will keep promises to others. Each completed hour reinforces your reliability. Over time, your name begins to carry meaning. It signals preparation. It signals depth. It signals follow-through. The contained hour shapes skill. Skill shapes performance. Performance, repeated consistently, shapes how others perceive you. Trust accumulates quietly, and once established, it becomes one of the most valuable assets you possess. When practiced long enough, the daily hour stops feeling like an isolated habit. It begins to influence how you think about your entire life. Up to this point, the focus has been execution. Showing up, finishing, protecting attention, compounding skill. Now a broader question emerges. Where is all of this effort leading? Without direction, even disciplined action can drift. Future drift is the default direction of life without deliberate correction. It happens gradually. You respond to opportunities as they appear. You adjust to circumstances. Years pass shaped more by reaction than intention. The daily hour interrupts that pattern, but only if it connects to something larger than itself. Expanding the hour into vision means clarifying how your contained commitment supports a long-term design. Not a fantasy. Not a dramatic prediction. A thoughtful direction. Imagine an architect who has dedicated years to mastering advanced sustainable design techniques during her daily hour. At first, her focus was skill development. Over time, she begins to see a larger pattern. She cares deeply about environmentally responsible urban spaces. Her private practice aligns with a broader mission. Instead of taking projects randomly, she gradually chooses work that supports that direction. She speaks more confidently about her perspective. She networks intentionally within that niche. Her daily hour continues, but now it feeds a clearly defined trajectory. Vision does not require certainty about the distant future. It requires alignment between today's effort and tomorrow's possibilities. A trajectory shift is a measurable long-term change created by repeated action. It is rarely sudden. It occurs when consistent practice intersects with clear direction. The same hour that once built general competence now builds targeted leverage. This shift begins with reflection. What kind of person are you becoming through your daily discipline? What environments would benefit most from the skills you are compounding? What problems are you increasingly equipped to solve? These questions are not asked for inspiration. They are asked for calibration. A practical exercise can bring clarity. Set aside one extended session at the end of a month and review the previous weeks of work. Identify the patterns in what you have been practicing. Then write a short description of where this path could lead in 3 to 5 years if continued steadily. Keep the description grounded and specific. After writing it, examine whether your current professional and personal decisions support that direction. If they do not, consider one small adjustment that would bring greater alignment. The power of a single hour multiplies when it is pointed. Direction does not mean rigidity. Life will still present unexpected opportunities. The difference is that you now evaluate them through a clearer lens. Does this move support my trajectory? Or does it pull me back toward drift? Clarity also increases motivation without requiring emotional intensity. When you understand how today's effort connects to a meaningful future, resistance decreases. The work feels purposeful, even when it is challenging. There is calm confidence in knowing that your days are not random. They are building towards something coherent. Over time, others may begin to see the pattern as well. They notice that your skills are not scattered. They form a consistent theme. Your reputation aligns with the direction. Opportunities begin to match your preparation. The daily hour remains contained. The structure remains steady. What changes is your awareness of its cumulative effect. A life can shift gradually without dramatic announcements. A career can pivot without sudden leaps. A person can evolve quietly into someone more capable, more intentional, more aligned. The hour is no longer just practice. It is architecture for your future. As your discipline stabilizes and your direction clarifies, something subtle begins to happen around you. Standards spread. Leadership rarely begins with a title. It begins with behavior that others can observe and measure. When your actions reflect a consistent personal standard, people adjust their expectations in response. A personal standard is not a demand placed on others. It is a line you refuse to cross in your own conduct. It governs how prepared you are, how you manage your time, how you complete commitments, how you respond under pressure. When this standard is visible and consistent, it influences the environment without force. Consider a project manager who has maintained her daily hour for years, sharpening her planning skills and refining her communication. In team meetings, she arrives with clear agendas and defined outcomes. She follows up on action items precisely. When deadlines approach, she remains organized rather than reactive. At first, the team operates as it always has. Over time, something shifts. Colleagues begin to prepare more thoroughly because they know she will notice gaps. They arrive on time because she does. They close loops because she consistently does. She does not lecture them about discipline. Her behavior establishes the tone. This is leadership through example. Influence grounded in discipline is steady. It does not rely on charisma or pressure. It relies on predictability. Others feel safer aligning with someone whose actions are stable. The daily hour strengthens this form of influence because it reinforces internal alignment. You are less likely to demand standards you do not practice. Hypocrisy weakens leadership quickly. Consistency strengthens it quietly. There is also restraint involved. A disciplined person does not react impulsively to every disagreement. They listen. They consider. They respond with intention. This measured pace often diffuses tension before it escalates. In family life, the same principle applies. If you consistently protect time for meaningful work, you communicate that growth matters. If you follow through on promises, others learn that your word carries weight. Children, partners, and colleagues observe more than they are instructed. Leadership built on personal standard does not require constant correction of others. It requires unwavering correction of oneself. A useful exercise can make this visible. For the next 30 days, identify one area where your standard could be slightly higher, perhaps punctuality, preparation, or clarity in communication. Raise it deliberately and maintain it without announcement. Do not explain the change. Let others experience it. Observe how interactions shift subtly in response. The goal is not control. It is coherence. When your private discipline aligns with your public behavior, your presence carries authority without aggression. People sense that you operate by principles rather than moods. There will be moments when maintaining your standard feels inconvenient. Lowering it would be easier. These moments define credibility. Each time you uphold your standard despite pressure, your influence deepens. Over years, this pattern compounds just as skill does. You become known not only for what you can do, but for how you conduct yourself. Titles may come or they may not. Recognition may be formal or informal. The deeper reward is this. You create environments that are slightly more structured, slightly more focused, slightly more reliable because you are present within them. The contained hour shaped your discipline. That discipline shaped your identity. Your identity now shapes the culture around you. Quietly, steadily, without announcement. The change did not arrive in a single moment. There was no dramatic turning point. No sudden reinvention. There were only hours. Quiet, contained, repeated. At first, the hour felt small, almost insignificant compared to the scale of your ambitions. Yet it continued. Through ordinary days. Through fatigue. Through uncertainty. Through success and disappointment. Over time, something irreversible occurred. Identity shifted because identity evidence accumulated. Skill deepened because skill compounding was allowed to operate without interruption. Trust formed because your behavior remained consistent. Direction clarified because your effort aligned with vision. This is how a trajectory shift happens. A trajectory does not change by intensity alone. It changes by angle. Even a slight adjustment, sustained long enough, leads to a different destination. The daily hour was that adjustment. Small in appearance. Decisive in effect. Look back several years. The version of you who struggled to begin now starts without negotiation. The version of you who left tasks unfinished now closes loops with steadiness. The version of you who reacted to distraction now protects attention deliberately. These shifts did not require extraordinary talent. They required containment. Imagine two professionals beginning at a similar level. One works in unpredictable bursts, driven by mood and urgency. The other commits to one focused hour each day, refining a core skill and finishing what he starts. In the first year, the difference is subtle. In the third year, it becomes noticeable. In the 10th year, it is undeniable. One career reflects drift. The other reflects direction. The separation was never dramatic. It was daily. The future you inhabit is built quietly in advance. Each contained hour lays another line of structure beneath your life. Confidence becomes grounded rather than inflated. Opportunities align with preparation. Decisions are made from clarity rather than impulse. There will still be challenges. Discipline does not eliminate difficulty. It equips you to meet it with steadiness. When setbacks occur, you do not collapse into chaos. You return to the hour. When success arrives, you do not abandon structure. You return to the hour. The hour becomes a stabilizing force across seasons. A final exercise can anchor this permanently. Write a brief letter to yourself dated 5 years from now. Describe, in specific terms, the capabilities you expect to have developed if you continue honoring your daily commitment. Describe the kind of reputation you will hold. Describe the calm presence you will embody. Seal that letter physically or digitally. Then return to your next scheduled hour and continue the work without drama. There is power in restraint. You did not attempt to change everything at once. You chose one defined promise and kept it. Contained commitment replaced vague intention. Emotional neutrality replaced intensity. Adaptive consistency replaced excuse. Personal standard replaced external pressure. The result is not merely improved productivity. It is a different relationship with yourself. You trust your word. You respect your time. You understand the mathematics of accumulation. Years from now, when others ask how your path shifted, the answer will not be impressive. It will be simple. 1 hour. Every day. Not perfect hours. Not heroic hours. Just protected, deliberate, repeated hours. The future is rarely rewritten in public. It is rewritten in private, inside containers small enough to sustain and strong enough to endure. Return tomorrow. Begin again. Continue the quiet construction. The trajectory has already changed.